Mesdames et Messieurs, a beautiful day in our nation's capital, and welcome to Ottawa City Council meeting number 53. Bienvenue à la Conseil municipal pour la ville d'Ottawa pour le...
Welcome to the May 12th Ottawa City Council.
This meeting is being held through electronic participation in accordance with Section 38 of the Municipal Act 2001 as amended by the COVID-19 Economic Recovery Act of 2020. A few reminders, s'il vous plaît. Members of council and staff, please stay on mute until called upon to speak. Phone-in participants may use *6 to mute and unmute. Members of council that wish to speak to an item, please use the raise hand feature located at the bottom of the participants list in Zoom, and *9 for members on the phone. And this meeting will be broadcast on Rogers Cable TV, 22 en anglais, 23 en français, and the Ottawa City Council YouTube channel. For those who are able to, please rise for a moment of personal reflection. Thank you. Merci. Roll call, please, Madam Clerk.
Councillor Luloff.
Présent.
Councillor Dudas.
I'm here.
Councillor Harder.
Here.
Councillor Suds.
Here.
Councillor El Shantiri.
Present.
Councillor Gower.
Here.
Councillor Kavanagh.
Here.
Councillor Shirley.
Here.
Councillor Egley.
Here.
Councillor Deans.
Here.
Councillor Tierney.
Présent.
Councillor Fleury.
Bonjour.
Councillor King.
Present.
Councillor McKenney. Councillor Leeper.
Here.
Councillor Brockington.
Here.
Councillor Menard.
Good morning.
Councillor Cloutier. Councillor Kitts.
Here.
Councillor DeRuse.
Here.
Councillor Meehan.
Here.
Councillor Hubley.
Here.
Mayor Watson. Le quorum est atteint, Monsieur le Maire.
Merci. Confirmation of minutes, adoption de processus verbaux pour la réunion le 28 avril.
Adoption of the minutes for the May 28th meeting.
Adopted. Declaration of interest, including those originally arising from prior meetings. Déclaration de conflit d'intérêt. See none. Communications is presented. Regrets, no regrets filed to date. Motion to introduce reports. Motion portant présentation de rapport. Conseiller King et Brockington, s'il vous plaît.
Councillor King and Brockington.
Agriculture and Rural Affairs Committee Report 21, Audit Committee Report 10, Finance and Economic Development Committee Report 24, Transportation Committee Report 18, and the report from the City Clerk, summary of oral and written public submissions for items subject to the Planning Act explanation requirements at the City Council meeting of April 28th, 2021 be received and considered.
On the motion, carried. Adopted. Merci. Rapport des comités, committee reports, Agriculture and Rural Affairs Committee number 21, rapport numéro 21 du comité de l'agriculture et des affaires rurales. Item 1, Ottawa Rural Clean Water Program 2016 to 2020 review and renewal. Received and carried.
Receive and carry.
Carried.
Item 2, amendment to the engineer's report for the Faulkner Municipal Drain. So did someone want to speak to that last item? No. The amendment to the engineer's report for the Faulkner Municipal Drain, modification de rapport de l'ingénieur sur le drain municipal Faulkner. Carried?
Carry.
Item 3, pelletized biosolids, biosolid granuel. Carried?
Carried.
Carried.
Audit Committee Report number 10, rapport numéro 10 du comité de la vérification. Item number 4, Office of the Auditor General Audit Recommendation Implementation Update Process, Proposed Modifications, Bureau du Vérificatrice Générale, Processus de mise à jour. Carried. Item 5, Office of the Auditor General, 2021 interim audit work plan, Bureau du vérificatrice générale, plan de vérification.
Office of the Auditor General, 2021 Interim Audit Work Plan.
Transportation Committee number 18, rapport numéro 18 du Comité des Transports. Numéro 7, speed reductions, gateway zones in Lower Town, Sandy Hill and Vanier, zone de limitation de vitesse dans les secteurs Basseville, Côte de Sable et Vanier. Councillor Shirley, is it a quick point or will we come back to it? Councillor Shirley.
Come back to it.
Come back to it, okay. Bulk consent agenda. Does anyone wish to remove anything from the bulk consent agenda?
Mr. Mayor, I apologize. You went through item 4, 5, and 6 very quickly. I had a question on item 6, which was the social housing registry and the AG's report. Is it possible to
Concurrence of council to return back to that item? Agreed?
Sorry about that. I just had a question.
Sorry, just for a second. We'll just make sure. On the bulk consent agenda as presented, carried?
Carried.
We have the first item is Councillor Fleury, item 6 from the Auditor General's report. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and sorry about that. It just slipped my mind here. I do have a question. I looked at the number of recommendations, and there a lot of them are in process, but process-oriented elements. But I didn't see any elements relating to list management, which is often elements that are raised at council or raised in the community relating to the amount of folks that are on the list, that some are overhoused, some are underhoused, the renewal of folks that are on the list. So I don't know, could we hear maybe from the AG in terms of if that was an area of review, and if not, I'm just looking for clarification on the specifics of context relating to list management for the social housing registry.
Okay, we have our new Auditor General. Bienvenue.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Maire. Conseiller Fleury.
Be welcome.
To let you know, our original audit on the social housing registry did include reviewing the list management. That being said, all recommendations within that area had already been addressed, so it is not included within our follow-up audit.
Appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Merci. On the report, adopté, carried.
Carried.
We're now back to Transportation Committee Report number 18, rapport numéro 18 du Comité des Transports. Councillor Shirley had a question on item 7, speed limits.
No, I don't now.
Okay, so on the report as presented, carried?
No, you have Councillor Moffat's hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry, Councillor. Go ahead.
Thanks. I just wanted to ask a couple things just about, I was on Transportation Committee for 8 years, and time again, we get speed limit reductions and always stop controls come forward, even though they've been reviewed by staff. We approved a 30-kilometer-hour speed limit zone policy, 2017, 2018? How much staff time goes into these studies for it just to be ignored, and we bring it to council and approve the zone anyways? It's just staff, because I just feel that a lot of us ask for a lot from our transportation staff, specifically the group that does these reviews. And quite often they don't have enough time for everything that they get asked for. It'd be nice if they could stop wasting their time on reports that are going to be ignored, and the council's just going to bring the report to council anyways for approval. But why waste staff's time when you know that your end result is, I'm just going to do this anyways? So can I just get a response from staff about just how much staff time actually went into these 3 areas?
I'll ask Mr. Landry to address that, Mr. Mayor.
Hi, Mr. Mayor and Councillor Moffat. Yeah, so in terms of these reports, the amount of time to actually write our comments is probably a couple of hours. We also, most of the time, need to go out and do some speed surveys if we don't have the data. If we have the data, then it's basically just going through our database, so it's probably a couple more. Probably say it's about a day or 2 for a report to complete.
And ultimately, when you do those reviews, your results, according to the speed zone policy that was approved by City Council, these areas don't support going to 30 kilometers an hour, correct?
That's correct, because if they did support them, we would have delegated them to do so. And we have a few zones in the city where they did support the 30 kilometers an hour and they were changed to 30K gateway signage.
Right. So in all likelihood, the councillor is hoping that the report, that the study results in changing the speed limit. But if it doesn't, they're just going to go and change it anyways. It's not much of a policy.
Well, the policy, sorry, you want me to, yeah, the policy's there. And ultimately, if, we had a report through the Road Safety Action Plan that was approved in 2019. And we, as new roads get built, as well as existing residential streets are rebuilt, they are built to 30 kilometers an hour speed. So ultimately, all these roads will be at 30 kilometers an hour in the future. We also, as part of these reports, recommend that temporary traffic calming measures be installed as part of this work, so that we create that environment. So this usually means painted bulb outs with flex posts at the entry to these intersections and areas.
Yeah, I just find reports like this. I mean, when it doesn't follow the policy that's approved by council, I just find it's a waste of time. You have, just this morning, we saw an email exchange about another community nearby saying, well, what about our community? Why don't you just add it? Pretty much asking council today to add their community to this motion so that it can be changed as well. And in the end, you're going to go and review it. You're going to come back and say the same thing you said about these ones. And then another motion is going to come forward to add that to the 30 zone policy. And then all of us get questions from our constituents and say, well, why not us? Oh, I saw a story about 30 kilometers an hour in Sandy Hill. Well, all of Mantix should be 30 kilometers an hour. Oh, we're doing 40 all through Richmond. Well, why don't you just do it 30? They're doing it elsewhere. Yeah, every single street in my ward could easily be 60, 50, 40 based on all the requests that I get. But policies don't support that. So, I mean, if we're going to do speed limits by ward, by councillors, then let's get rid of speed zoning policy and just say that's what we're doing. But I just don't understand why we have policies. Just on the bulk consent agenda, there's 2 always stop controls. I bet your staff reviewed those and bet you came out with not supporting always stop control. We all know that always stop control is unwarranted, actually could increase the risk of accidents. But I guess we don't care because people asked for it, so we just do it anyways. Anyways, that's all. I'm just a little bit, it's been 10 years of this, 10 years of seeing these reports come forward against our own policy. We keep on asking for policies that support what we want, and then we approve the policy, but then we just do whatever we want anyway. It just seems odd. Thanks, Phil.
Great, thank you. Councillor Menard, please.
Yeah, and I was going to say more, but maybe I don't need to say too much. I just, in an ideal world, what would happen is you have an entire area that may warrant this come forward. I think Councillor Leeper was talking about this before, for example, in the core, and you get the whole area done. And then as you move through it, you adapt to those conditions. The road gets reconstructed. It's a 30-kilometer-hour road, or there's temporary traffic calming that comes into it. We've been having to do it, just to Councillor Moffat's point, gateway by gateway. So we look at the gateway. Oftentimes, most of it qualifies for a 30-kilometer, but there might be a street or two that doesn't within the gateway. But at the same time, you want the whole thing uniform. You don't want to have it say, okay, the whole thing's here on the residential 30-kilometer, but there's one street or two that aren't qualifying for some technical reasons that we don't do. You'd rather have it uniform. And the other piece is our technical policy around this. We're constantly looking at it, right? There's recent studies that are coming out that are showing that even with a speed change without some infrastructure amendments, it does have an effect on behavior. And the long-term thinking was it didn't, that you couldn't just change the speed, people will do whatever they want to. But there are studies coming out now showing, no, there is a change in behavior. So it is a bit fluid. I understand the councillor's point, and there's technical pieces to this. And at the same time, we all want increased safety in our wards. So, I mean, I thank staff for looking at this with us anyway. We've been doing it piece by piece as we've moved through. And I know it's not always, perfect in terms of the technical policy and some of the studies that are coming out. So I understand the points being made, but just thanks to staff for working to, improve safety where we can. Appreciate it.
Councillor Leeper, please.
Thanks. Thanks, Mayor. I think certainly it takes time for staff to put some comments into these kinds of motions that instead of making the gateway zone 40 kilometers per hour, make them 30 kilometers per hour. But they actually save, I think, a fair bit of staff time in that if the speed limit is only reduced to 40 kilometers per hour, we know that we're going to have to work on a street by street basis to deal with the requests by residents to make them 30K. And that's oftentimes a matter of implementing TTCs, each of which is actually a fairly intensive piece of work on the part of staff to study and ascertain whether the TTC is appropriate. We've done things like paint white bulb outs on streets in order to narrow them so that they do meet the 30K policy. And again, that's staff time that has to be used, as well as the expense of the paint and staff going out and painting a white bulb out on the street in order to theoretically narrow it. These motions, I think, they meet with what residents are going to persist in requesting, and that each of our offices is actually going to spend really significant amounts of time on a one-by-one street by street basis, and we're going to loop city staff into each one of those 30 kilometer per hour implementations. We obviate the need for the petitions that are obviously a huge drain on residents' time. So while there is certainly some time that goes into these omnibus, the whole gateway is going to be 30 kilometer per hour, it actually saves the time that we know we're going to have to put into a street by street implementation of the 30K. So I'm happy to support Councillor Furr's motion.
Great. Any other questions or comments? No, just one observation. I'm supporting obviously the recommendation before us, but I think we have to continue to work with our partners with the Ottawa Police, because without enforcement, we could put it down to 5 kilometers an hour. And if there's no enforcement, people will still abuse the rules of the road. And we know the faster you go, the more likelihood of a child or a family pet or a senior or anyone, quite frankly, can be seriously injured or killed. So I remember when I was on council, and I think most of you will share this the same sentiment, the number one complaint I used to get all the time was speeding on residential roads. Consistently people, I discovered when I became mayor that every single ward has the worst speeding problems in the entire city. I know that's not quite true. Some not physically possible to do that, but the reality is it's a concern. And I was pleased when Chief Slowly indicated some time ago that traffic enforcement was going to be one of his priorities, because we're certainly hearing it from constituents on a regular basis. So on the report, carried. Adopté.
Carried.
Carried. Thank you.
Disposition of items approved by committee under delegated authority suite à donner des articles ratifiés par les comités en vertu de pouvoirs délégués. Received. A motion to adopt reports. Motion portant adoption de rapport. Conseiller King et Brockington, s'il vous plaît.
That Agriculture and Rural Affairs Committee Report 21, Audit Committee Report 10, Finance and Economic Development Committee Report 24, Transportation Committee Report 18, and the report from the City Clerk, summary of oral and written public submissions for items subject to the Planning Act explanation requirements at the City Council meeting of April 28th, 2021 be received and adopted as amended.
On the motion, carried. Adopté. Motions requiring suspension of the rules of procedure. Motion exigeant la suspension des règles de procédure. I have a motion seconded by Councillor Deans with respect to development charge deferral at the Boys and Girls Club. It's a timely issue. On suspension, carried. This is, as you know, we have a very exciting project that is going to be built in Councillor Dean's ward and serve her ward, and Councillor Brockington and Councillor Cloutier's in the south end of the city, a Boys and Girls Club. And I'll just read the motion. Whereas the Boys and Girls Club of Ottawa is a suitable shovel-ready project with constrained project delivery timelines, and whereas should funding become available for construction, the Boys and Girls Club will wish to proceed with their project at the earliest opportunity. And whereas the Development Charges Act permits certain institutional uses to defer development charges, but the Boys and Girls Club do not qualify under the regulations. Therefore, be it resolved that Council approve the deferral of the DCs on the same basis as an institutional use that is statutory entitled to a deferral. The Boys and Girls Club of Ottawa enter into an agreement to the satisfaction of the General Manager, Planning, Infrastructure and Economic Development and the City Solicitor, setting out the details for the deferral of the payment of DCs and the waiver of interest charges. And further, be it resolved that such agreement be registered, if permitted, under the Land Titles Act. So this is, as you know, we have a great partnership with the Boys and Girls Club, and we're anxiously working with the federal government for their support, as well as the provincial government for their support for this very exciting, much needed facility in the south end of the city. So we have Councillor El Shantiri would like to comment.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I think most of you would know I'm a big supporter of the Boys and Girls Club. For many years, I've been even on the police board. We support them tremendously. One question, and really it is from the policy perspective, and I thought the development charge policy, if we to waive the development charge, so it has to come from somewhere. Can the treasurer or somebody tell me if we defer the development charge fee, where that will come from?
Yeah, I'll ask the treasurer to comment, but this is not waiving the fees; it's deferring the fees at this point. Madam Treasurer, is that
deferring to what? 1 year, 5 years? Is there a limit on deferring?
Mr. Mayor, perhaps may I answer the question about the deferral, and then I'll defer to the treasurer on the answer on waiver. So we are responding to a request from the Boys and Girls Club on deferral only. They did not ask for a waiver. The project costs submitted for the grant funding application included the development charges to begin with, and we believe that will be financed through what will ultimately be approved. There's a cash flow problem that normally, in order to pull a building permit, you need to pay the development charges the day of pulling the building permit. They may not have the grant money from the governments at that point in time. This allows us to tie the payment to when they actually get paid.
And Madam Treasurer.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Willis is correct. It's just a cash flow issue, Councillor. We don't have to match anything because these DCs are not being formally not collected or canceled. So it's just a timing issue in terms of cash flow.
I truly appreciate the explanation, because someone who sat on the development charge, the sponsor group, I have to tell you, we spent a lot of days to get where we are. So that's why I had to ask the question. Thank you very much.
Yeah, well said. Thank you. Anyone else on the item? On the item, carried? Adopté?
Carried.
Carried.
The next motion requiring suspension of the rules of procedure is by Councillor Fleury and seconded by Councillor King, the demolition of 191 Heritage Maple Way. Councillor Fleury, please. Oh, sorry, on suspension. Carried? Adopté?
Carried.
Councillor Fleury, your motion, please.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, this is a motion that many of us are bringing forward. Do you want me to read it, or should we just move to the therefore be it resolved?
Yeah, I think just the therefore be it resolved. It's on the screen.
That City Council approved demolition control for the existing building on the property subject to the following condition. One, that the property owner paid $3,472, which includes legal fees and HST, which is the fee associated with the demolition control application. Two, that until the time of construction of the first replacement building, the registered owner shall landscape the property to the satisfaction of the general. The registered owner shall prohibit the use of the property to other interim uses and maintain the property in accordance to the property standards bylaw. And three, the landscaping of the property shall be finalized in collaboration with the city staff. I think there's a few more. Four, the owner shall pay 100% securities to the city for the value of the landscaping of landscaping the property with the securities to be released once these works are completed. 5, the owner agrees that at the discretion of the general manager, planning, infrastructure, and economic development department, a replacement building be substantially completed within 5 years from the date of this approval. And in default therein of, the city clerk shall enter in a collection roll the sum of $5,960 for the one residential dwelling unit for the one residential dwelling unit to be demolished. 6, the registered owner shall enter into an agreement with the City of Ottawa to include the foregoing conditions and pay all costs associated with the registration of said agreement. At the time as the building permit is issued, the to redevelop the site and the replacement building is in place, the agreement will become null and void and will be released upon request of the owner. The owner shall pay all costs associated with the release of the agreement. 7, the owner agrees that the demolition permit will not be issued and the building cannot be demolished until such that the agreement referenced herein has been executed and registered on title. And 8, that this approval will be considered null and void if the agreement is not executed within 6 months of council's approval.
Okay, any questions or comments? Est-ce des questions, commentaires on the motion? Carried? Adopted?
Carried.
Thank you.
We have Councillor Cloutier and Councillor Aiglai have a motion with respect to private approaches as a notice of motion, and the mover, Councillor Cloutier, has asked that we deal with it today. It's pretty standard request. We've seen a number of these over the years. So on suspension, carried. Councillor Cloutier, do you want to just give us the Coles note version?
Merci, Monsieur le Maire. Thank you very much, and thank you to Councillor Aiglai for seconding the motion. It's with respect to the reconstruction of Valley Drive, a major reconstruction program that will go on over a couple of years to alleviate flooding in the area. It's the private approach, and the therefore be it resolved is that Council approved that in respect to the reconstruction of Valley Drive, private approaches be reinstated as they were immediately prior to the reconstruction of this street, and there has been no complaints with respect to those private approaches as they are currently exist.
Thank you. Merci. Est-ce qu'il y a des questions? Any questions? On the motion by Councillor Cloutier, seconded by Councillor Aiglai. Carried?
Carried. Thank you.
Are there any other motions requiring suspension of the rules of procedure? Est-ce qu'il y a des autres motions? No. Notice is a motion for consideration at subsequent meeting. Avis de motion pour examen à réunion subséquente. Councillor Brockington has a motion seconded by Councillor Luloff. Councillor Brockington, if you'd like to introduce it, and it'll be debated at the next meeting.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, appreciate the opportunity, and thank you to Councillor Luloff for seconding this motion regarding a national suicide prevention hotline. Whereas in December 2020, the House of Commons passed a motion to establish a national suicide prevention 988 helpline that calls for the collaboration with the provinces and territories to establish a hotline, consolidating all suicide crisis numbers into one 3-digit hotline phone number. And whereas the feasibility of creating the national hotline is being studied by the Public Health Agency of Canada and the Centre of Addiction and Mental Health, and whereas a national survey commissioned by the Canadian Mental Health Association and UBC found that the COVID pandemic has intensified feelings of stress and anxiety among Canadians, with thoughts or feelings of suicide having risen fourfold since the pandemic began. Whereas the same survey determined that few Canadians are getting the support they need and are resorting to unhealthy coping strategies. And whereas prior to the pandemic, StatsCan reported that approximately 4,000 Canadians were dying each year from suicide. And whereas the same survey, and whereas the Canadian Suicide Prevention Service reported that calls for service increased 200% in October of 2020 compared to the same period, whereas existing suicide prevention hotlines require the user to remember a 10-digit phone number, whereas the intent of the hotline is to quickly connect people facing a mental health crisis with trained counselors who can help. And whereas there are no timelines associated with the establishment of a national hotline, whereas the CRTC is ultimately responsible for deciding whether a hotline will proceed. Therefore, be it resolved that Ottawa City Council endorse the establishment of a national suicide prevention 988 helpline, and be it further resolved that the mayor, on behalf of City Council, write to the Federal Minister of Health, Provincial Minister of Health, and the CRTC expressing the City of Ottawa's support for this initiative. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Councillor. Important subject. Any other notices of motion for consideration of subsequent meeting? No? Okay. Motion to introduce bylaws. Motion portant présentation de règlement. Councillor King, please.
That the bylaws listed on the agenda under motion to introduce bylaws, 3 readings, be read and passed.
On the motion, carried. Adopté.
Carried.
Confirmation bylaw. Councillors King and Brockington, please.
That the following bylaw be read and passed to confirm the proceedings of the council meeting of 12 May 2021.
Adopté. Carried.
Carried.
Madam Deputy Clerk, any inquiries?
No, Mr. Mayor.
Just a reminder, the media availability will take place 15 minutes after this meeting, so 10:45. La conférence de presse est 11h moins 15. Adjournment, Councillor King, please. Councillor Brockington.
That the proceedings of the City Council meeting of May 12th, 2021 be adjourned.